still seems like fans are impatient with it. I saw a tweet earlier in the week that says we shouldn't be talking about what happened 3 years ago. It's time now. Why are you still bringing up the past? The thing is, dude, this is still a really young team. And we knew it was going to take a few seasons to get it right. And I'm happy with the direction that the Pistons have gone in. I'm glad to have this many young guys that look like they could potentially be multiple time All-Stars. You got 4 on the team where they all might make at least one All-Star appearance, maybe even a few more down the line. Cade for sure, Ivy, Asar, and Duran. The jury's still out, but they look solid. There's no perfect way to do this, and I really wish fans would just kind of relax and temper their expectations. I know it's been a long time since we've really competed for anything, but I promise you, we are on the verge of something special in Detroit.
Yeah, I think it's really easy for Pistons fans right now to have those comments, like you said, because if you look at teams that were in a similar situation as the Pistons, I'm going to use the Houston Rockets, for example, because I think that's another team that went through the rebuilding process. They've been in the lottery just like the Pistons over the last couple of seasons. But Houston was like, you know what? We've been doing this for 3 years, 4 years. It's enough. We're ready to go all in. And that's what they did this offseason. Excuse me. You get Dylan Brooks. You get Fred VanVleet. You get rotational guys that make sense. You hire a championship level coach. They're ready to compete. Now, could the Pistons have done that this offseason? Yes, they could have. They could have gone all in. They could have gone splurging, and signed some free agents this summer to make this team just as competitive as the Houston Rockets. But I think the one thing when I look at Houston versus Detroit is what Houston did is very risky because it could blow up in their face and they could be rebuilding maybe in the next 3 to 4 years if it doesn't work out. But those are risks you have to take when you're an organization. Now, how it relates to the Detroit Pistons is Troy Weaver looked at the roster. They hired that, championship level coach in Monty Williams. They have their core guys that they're going to build around in Cade, Ivy, Asar, and Duran. But Troy's telling you, I don't think we're ready yet. I don't think we're ready for that veteran that's really going to take us over the top yet. And whether I agree with it or not, I'm willing to be patient because this team has never gone through a rebuild like this in my entire life as being a Detroit Piston fan.
Exactly.
This is the first time I've ever seen so much young and up-and-coming talent on this basketball team. I was spoiled with the go-in-the-work Pistons, and I was even spoiled growing up in the Grant Hill era. They were still making the playoffs each and every year. But this is a team that is building organically through the draft. They might be marginal pieces that you get each and every year. Like you draft Cade, you get Ivy, you get Duran, you get Asar, you get Marcus Sasser. You sign vets like a Monte Morris, who I hope we keep. You trade for Joe Harris, you trade for Bojan. Like, I'm willing to be patient, but I can understand the Piston fan that's saying, like, you know what, like, I don't ever want to go through what we've gone through over the past 4 years under Troy Weaver. And I think you need to add context to that because when Troy took over, he had no cap space, he had no trade assets, and when you have to start a rebuild from the ground up and you have no tradable assets, like, I want to use Portland as an example right now.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the Trailblazers, they had Damian Lillard, and they got a shitload of assets for Damian Lillard. And then they trade Drew Holiday to Boston, even more assets. And you look at the Portland Trailblazers young core, that's how rebuilds can really amplify and really speed up is when you have those tradable assets. The Pistons' tradable assets before Troy Weaver got there were Andre Drummond. Got a second-round pick for him, and Brandon Knight. John Henson. You really didn't get a whole lot. Blake Griffin was not tradable unless you threw a first-round pick onto his contract, and the Pistons weren't in a position to do that. And I think a lot of Pistons fans, maybe they forget or maybe they don't want to have this conversation, because it's hard, because you didn't like the Blake Griffin trade in the first place and you thought it kind of set the team back 3-4 years. You're right, it did, but I think context matters. And I know Pistons fans are sick of losing. I'm sick of them losing. I really am. And I think you are too. You want them to get back into the playoffs and compete. And I think it'll happen. It's just when you look at rebuilds across the NBA, the Pistons are one of the very few teams that started from scratch. They didn't have a tradable asset to fast track the rebuild. I mean, even the Magic, they got the trade to Aaron Gordon and other pieces, Nikola Vucevic to the Bulls. I mean, they had a fast track rebuild as well because they had tradable assets. The Pistons have never had that. I think Pistons fans, maybe they forget, or maybe they're just so pissed off that this team hasn't won a playoff game in 14 years, which it's understandable, but you have to take into account who was running the team at the time and, what the goal was, what from the owner. So, I mean, like I said, dude, I know I just ranted for like maybe, 5 minutes of like why this organization has been, rebuilding for the last 4 years. And it's just little marginal improvements, but I know the Pistons time is coming. We just have to stay patient with it. And I think you hired the right coach to get the most out of the players that you currently have. But um, that's just my message to Pistons fans that are frustrated with it. But do you have anything to add to it?
No, I was just gonna say I've been happy with it. I mean, even though watching only 17 wins last year was tough, but I love the position the Pistons are in right now. You have a franchise player in Cade. You have a two-way star in Asar Thompson. You have a quick lightning rod point guard in Jaden Ivey. And you have a guy in Jalen Duren that could potentially be one of the 10 best players in the NBA alongside Cade Cunningham. The Pistons have never had that. I mean, you have a GM with an actual direction in which he wants to take this team. You have a head coach that has had failures, has had the highest and the highest of highs and the lowest of lows in the NBA as a head coach. He's been around. Like, that is incredible. You still have assets now that are going to be moved off your books, and Joe Harris and Bojan. That's, I think, what, $39 million they're going to have to play with next year. And I would rather have them slow it down and use that money next off season when they know what they have. If Cade looks like he's going to be a top 25 player, top 15 player, whatever it is, you can go out and spend that money on a Pascal Siakam, on maybe an Aaron Gordon, or on whoever else is in free agency that can push this team over the top. But you have to see what you have, because if you shortcut a rebuild, we're going to be back in this position in just a few seasons where we're going to be looking back and be like, man, if they had just taken their time and if the Pistons were just a little bit more patient, we'd be better situated. But if we rush it, we take a shortcut, we cut through the grass when we should stay on the sidewalk, it's gonna suck, and we're gonna be right back where we're at. I love what Troy Weaver is doing, but I get why Pistons fans are upset. But you also have to look back, like you were saying. Look what we had 3 years ago. We had nothing on this team that was of value to anybody else. And it was a steep hill to climb, but man, we're actually out of the hole now. I mean, we're in a favorable position. And I think a lot of fan bases would love to be in the position that the Pistons are in. Yeah, maybe we don't win a ton of games this year, but we're going to win more than 17, and we're going to be able to be excited about it. And we're going somewhere with this roster.
Yeah, I think, like I said, that context does matter because, like, Portland, they're going to be in good position. Orlando, the great position, but like they had tradable assets. Like we don't have that. Like even New Orleans, when they traded Anthony Davis, look how quickly New Orleans became a bottom feeder to people talking about them being Western Conference contenders with Zion and Brandon Ingram. And this past season, or last season, I should say, they traded for CJ McCollum because they were ready to make that next move in their stage of trying to compete. I think the Pistons can get there. It's just you have to get those pieces in place, and like you said, you don't really know what you have in Cade Cunningham yet. Like if he's a top 15 player, you go out and get that Brandon Ingram. You go out and get that complementary player to help this team get to the playoffs. It'll happen. We just have to wait and see what we have in this young core, and it's extremely young. Maybe you trade some of that young core for a superstar. You never know. Like
Yep.
Jaden Ivey, he's valuable. Asar Thompson's valuable. Jalen Duren's valuable. Like you never really know what could happen over these next couple of seasons with the Pistons. But I don't want to sound like I'm a Troy Weaver like faithful by any means. If I don't agree with something he does, I come on this podcast and I tell you. If I like something he does, I come on this podcast, I tell you. I try to keep it strictly down the middle. I'm not trying to, drink the Pistons Kool-Aid like some other Pistons fans. And I think the Pistons fans that do that, there's nothing wrong with that. But I just try to be as fair as I can when I see good things happen. When I see bad things happen, I'll let you know. But I think for what he took over, he's doing the best he can, man. Like, I don't think anyone else could have, turned this organization around so quickly because he had to get his cap space right. Like, I couldn't tell you the last time the Pistons had cap space the last 2 seasons. I can't remember it because it seems like we always overpaid for free agents, whether it was like, Ben Gordon or Charlie V or Josh Smith or giving Andre Drummond a max, giving Reggie Jackson $80 million. Like, I could go down the list. Like, we haven't really had cap flexibility, and I think that's something that he's brought to this organization. And I think when the time comes, the Pistons will make that big game move. They'll try to get that star next to Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, Asar Thompson, to try to get that playoff spot.